From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Doc Staples bringing you Unconquered with Doc Staples. As always, this podcast is sponsored by EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price, by Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, by Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, by Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and by Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida. All right, well, I didn't do a hot takes this week. I told you I probably wasn't going to do anything in terms of hot takes until things had cooled down. Had a pretty busy Saturday and kind of kept up with the game a little bit in the background, but it was pretty obvious pretty early that things were not going to, there was not going to be a whole lot of question in there. And that's really what we expected. I mean, I was projecting 66-6. Kind of figured those numbers would go together for a Black Air Force One revenge tour game. And I underestimated exactly how much, by how much Florida State would actually beat this team. I mean, I said Gus would score 80 if he was given the leeway to do so. And they very nearly did score 80. They actually probably should have scored 80 given the way that game went. They were essentially a turnover, a drop ball, good defensive play, but a fourth string quarterback getting blindsided, and that turnover happening away from being a shutout and potentially scoring 84 points in that game. You know, I don't think there's a whole lot to be learned from this game in terms of the overall starters or a whole lot else in terms of evaluating personnel, the sort of thing that we normally do on this show. That not a whole lot of stuff to really break down, at least with the starters. But I did think that this was a useful game for all sorts of reasons, for not just the coaches, but also me as well, being able to assess what's behind those guys. And it was also a game where you got to assess sort of the condition of the culture at Florida State. A year after things were, I think we can pretty safely say 2-10 was about as close to rock bottom as you're going to get at Florida State. And the way that team didn't compete, and just the overall sense of that team, that was about as far, that was probably rock bottom for Florida State, for this, for modern Florida State. Maybe you could go back to the 50s or early 60s and try to find something lower. Sure, they did go winless at one point, but in the modern game, that's rock bottom. Well, I think it's safe to say that the culture is very healthy, because this team came out utterly focused, faceless opponent. Their whole process and their commitment to the process was, we're going to go out and dominate. I'm going to go out and do my job. And I'm going to play as hard as I can with my hair on fire, no matter what my opponent is, no matter who my opponent is. And they went out there like it was Alabama. Although there were a few plays where actually they didn't play as hard as they did against Alabama. There were a few plays where the offensive line, after the back got through and kind of got stacked up, they weren't rushing to the pile the way that I guarantee you the coaching staff wants them to do and will flag after this game. I can guarantee you that there were some guys who was like, look, this is a backside loaf because of that, among a few of those starters. And it did happen just a little bit, but not very much. And you can tell that this is a team that holds themselves accountable to do those little things right. Now, the other big order of business was make it out of the game healthy. You did have Squirrel White go down with a wrist injury. It appears, as of the time that I'm recording this on Sunday, it does appear that that it's not going to be a long-term injury. He's expected to make his way back. The question, of course, is how much might that impact his ability to catch? Because wrist injuries do matter. It affects your hand strength and those sorts of things. I don't think you'd expect to see him play next week. Or, well, they've got a open date next week, but I think in 2 weeks against Kent State, he's not going to play. Virginia, odds are he's on the field, but we'll see. Otherwise, came out pretty healthy. James Williams also left with what looked like some sort of, he looked like he got dinged up, maybe got hit in the lower leg. Couldn't really tell what it was, and I haven't gotten any intel on that, so don't know what really to expect there. But it didn't look like, a torn ligament or anything like that. So, but you never know. We'll see what that was. But otherwise, they got out really healthy, and they played 90 players in this game. Got an opportunity to see a lot of different guys in different positions and see who can do what. Really, really valuable. And the other thing about this kind of game, when you had some of these starters that were getting 12, 14 reps and then they were done. One of the things that does is it keeps you healthier. One of the other things, by the way, that having a really good offensive line does is it's easier for a really good offensive line to stay healthy over the course of the season, because it's a lot less common for a really good offensive line to have their back get hit in the backfield and roll up on one of them. And that's how most offensive linemen get hurt, is getting rolled up on from behind. Well, when you're really good on the offensive line and your backs are falling forward beyond the line of scrimmage rather than on your legs, you're more likely to stay healthy. And that's something, again, we saw in this game. Actually, there was one play where Richie Leonard kind of got leg whipped from behind, and it was a scary play. And I think he, for a second on the ground, sort of had a moment of reflection of like, whew, that was close. But his feet were off the ground right when that all happened, so it ended up being fine. But I got to say, these guys really, really played some good football in this game across the board. And as you start to evaluate what this team is able to do, the fact that they're scoring at will in the running game for the most part in a game like this does tell you a lot about how well they're buckled down, and tells you a lot about the focus and drive of that team. And, it takes you back to, say, 2013, where that team, they weren't interested in just winning. They weren't interested in going out there and getting accolades or whatever. They wanted to kill people. They wanted every game to show that they wanted to enforce their will on every game. And this team has a lot of that kind of dog in them in that respect. Now, I do want to evaluate, and that's what the second part of this show is going to be. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this show. This is going to be a short show. But the second part of the show, what I'm going to do, I do want to walk through some of the things that I saw in terms of the backups. Because they made it to the fourth string at a lot of positions, fifth string on a few. And got a chance to see sort of, okay, where do things stand? Who stands out? Who looks good? All of that. And yeah, I suppose now would be a good time to go ahead and do that. So we'll go ahead into the second part of the show, and we'll go to talk about some of the backups and basically what we saw. The most important thing I was looking at, I wanted to see, okay, backups on the offensive line. How do they look? What do those guys look like? And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised on the whole by what I saw. Now, I expected Sandman Thompson, the freshman center, to look like he's, the future there. He did. I wasn't sure, though, what to expect from Lucas Simmons at left tackle. He's kind of been a mystery for a while. I mean, he had that freshman year where he basically wasn't really even able to practice due to some health stuff. Last year was kind of a mystery as well. So, your third year here, and you don't really know what you have in him. And then watched it, and I went, okay, there's a chance that he might actually be good, which is really, really encouraging. I think if you go back and you watch that film from a coach's perspective, they're all breathing a sigh of relief that, okay, Lucas actually looked pretty good. He did his job. He moved well. He, showed some physicality. He's never going to be the most physical guy in the world, but he's a guy that actually showed he can play left tackle. Now, level of competition, obviously really, really low. But again, the movement skills, the assignment stuff, playing with some intensity, those are all good signs. And I thought the overall backup offensive line, that was Lucas Simmons, Andre Otto, Jacob Rizzi was there at a couple spots for a while. They gave him a bunch of reps. And then once it was time for him to be done, then it was Chavez Thompson at center. Then Jaden Todd, the redshirt freshman, was the right guard, number 78. And then Jonathan Daniels, the redshirt freshman, was the right tackle. And, I thought on the whole, those guys looked pretty good as a unit. And they handled their business. They all bent. They all communicated. They by and large held on to their blocks. That's something I was actually really pleased with Simmons about. Is that he held on to his blocks and didn't. And he was pretty sticky. Moved his feet. You could see the movement skills from these guys. They all moved their feet. The fundamentals looked pretty good. And I tell you what, the growth that you've seen on the offensive line, just in terms of overall fundamentals, since Herb Hand has been on campus, has been a big, big deal. That guy is a really good offensive line coach, and it's paying huge dividends. Now, the thing that was maybe a little surprising to me is they scored 77 points, and really they did not get beyond the second string on the offensive line. Rizzi, they consider kind of a second, as a sixth starter. So, if you want to say, okay, well, Thompson and Todd are technically third string behind Rizzi. Well, that's true, but they really think of him as a sixth starter. And Medley is technically the right tackle. And he actually looked good at right tackle when he went in for Pettis. That's what they did initially, is that they put in Rizzi at right guard, kept Pettibone at center for a little bit longer, and then had Medley swing out to right tackle, and then use that as the offensive line for a drive or two, just to get those guys some experience together in that game context. And it made a lot of sense to do. Because, if somebody goes down, those are guys that are going to slide into those spots. And yeah, I think that all made a lot of sense, but I was surprised that beyond that, Lucas Simmons, Andre Otto, Chavez Thompson, Jaden Todd, and Jonathan Daniels were the only other offensive linemen that played. I didn't see, Ty Hilton. I didn't see, you've got Josh Raymond out there potentially as a transfer. You've got Jalen Matthews, or Jalen, I don't even know how he says that. Manasseh Etete didn't play that I saw. A few of those guys. It's like, okay, well, where are they in the development process? We really don't know, because they really focused, and I actually think it's a smart move. They focused on getting that second unit the extra reps. And considering the third unit is really basically a bunch of true freshmen, a couple redshirt freshmen, but it's basically all freshmen. And odds are, going into the next few weeks, you really just want to make sure that if somebody goes down, your number twos are ready. It makes sense to really spend all that time with the twos. I was a little surprised by it, but I thought it was the right call. Now, it'll be interesting if against Kent State in a couple weeks, if they're in a similar situation and they're up by 50, do they slide in one of those other guys that didn't really play in this game? My guess is no. I think they've got they're too deep. And those are the guys in the offensive line that are going to play, and everybody else is in line for a red shirt, or, if they've already redshirted, they're not playing right now. And I think that makes sense. I got no objection to that. Other things that stood out, I thought Chase Lofton looked really good moving around as a backup slot receiver / tight end at his size. There's some there. Felt pretty good, about the future of that position. Receiver, you still have some development to do in terms of your depth. Gavin Blackwell was a guy that came on really late. I mean, I expected to see him maybe a little earlier, but he's late in the process. Elijah Moore had a couple nice plays there. A few guys just in general that, need to take a step forward for them to be where they need to be offensively. LaWayne McCoy still out with an injury. I don't know how long it's going to take for him to be there. But yeah, offensively, I thought that was the bulk of what we could take away everywhere except for quarterback. And at quarterback, Kevin Sperry might actually be good. Like, he actually might be the heir apparent, like a legitimate guy that can play. I think we saw more from Sperry on Saturday. And again, you have to, adjust for opponent. So, I'm cautious saying this, but I think we may have seen more from Sperry there than we did from either Glenn or Kromenhoek last year, the entire year. Now, again, lack of pressure, had receivers who actually caught the football and all that, but Sperry is an athlete. And you could see that, first of all, he's a really good athlete. And Brock Glenn's a good athlete as well. But the way that Sperry threw it, I thought was better than what we've seen from either Glenn or Kromenhoek since they've been on campus. But Glenn played pretty dang well himself when he got in there. You can really see the difference when you've got a running game, when you've got receivers that catch it, and an offensive line that protects you, how much more comfortable Brock Glenn looks. So the good thing, though, is that I think if Castellanos, and I expect Castellanos to apply for the redshirt waiver, there's a chance that he could come back in 2026. But if he doesn't come back in 2026, right now I would expect Sperry to be the front runner for that job. We'll see. But Sperry looks like he could be a dude, which is a good sign. Now, on the defensive side, I thought by and large what you saw was guys flying around at every level. I'm not even going to discuss the starters, Elijah Herring, Justin Cryer, Blake Nicholson, those guys. The secondary, we kind of know what we got at that point. You know what you're seeing based on what you saw against Alabama from that group. I did think in general the communication was a little bit cleaned up in the back end. That was a positive to take away. But again, level of play, level of competition impacts that. So you kind of have to grade on a curve there. But on the whole, you feel pretty good there. A few things that did stand out to me on defense. Number one, I think the defense really needs Kevin Wynn to return at nose tackle to really be the defense that they can be and be who they need to be against the meat of the schedule, against your Miami of Florida, against your Clemsons, some of those teams. They're going to be a whole lot better if they can get another really big difference maker at nose tackle in addition to Darrell Jackson. And I will say Daniel Lyons has actually finally made the jump. He, in terms of overall level of play and level of effort, he's finally getting there. He's made the leap. He's become that impactful player that you go, okay, that guy looks really good. As a matter of fact, I think he might be playing better right now than Farmer did last year. And he's in a position where he might be playing himself into draft position. We'll see. He's got to continue that over the course of the year, but early returns look really promising, especially when you look at what he did against Alabama. But it does make a big, big difference if you can get a really big player and an explosive player at that size, like a Kevin Wynn, that then you can spell Darrell Jackson with. I think you could see at times, they had Deontay McCray in there at nose tackle at times, and I think it was the second play that he was lined up at nose. They actually got about a 12-yard run where the back squirted through that gap. It's like, okay, you can see the difference without Jackson or Lyons at that nose tackle spot. And ideally you want Lyons to be able to line up on the, at one of those defensive end spots, especially on rundowns. And really you want to be able to rotate Wynn in there. Sampson played fine, but again, just in terms of body size and, level of athlete, level of player, I think Wynn makes this defense a lot better moving forward and is going to be important for taking off some of the load from some of those other interior players. I'm not sure that Jason Jenkins is 100% recovered, but he's a good player. And I do think the next 3 weeks, as they have an open date, Kent, and then another open date, they're going to have some opportunities to rest up, get further healthy, and then you got to go into Virginia, and Virginia looks a lot better than anybody thought preseason. I thought maybe Chandler would help them, but I didn't expect that they would be quite as good on the offensive line after all the injuries and all that they'd had. Morris is a good player at quarterback, and he's really changed what they can do offensively. He makes them a threat just because, if you got a quarterback that can throw darts and you can actually create some big plays with some speed receivers, you become dangerous. But all in all, I think Kevin Wynn returning basically completes Florida State's rotation to make them a legitimate playoff type team on the defensive line as long as they can stay healthy. Now, James Williams still, and again, got dinged up a little bit in this game, but he's still just, dude needs to learn how to tackle. There was one where he had the running back dead to rights in the backfield and just put his head down and lunged and just whiffed. And you cannot do that. He's got to be patient as a tackler and just find a way to make solid contact and wrap up. Don't just drop your head. It looks to me at times like he's closing his eyes before contact because he's just losing location of the ball carrier as he's lunging to make a play. But that's something that still needs to be fixed and corrected. Jaden Jones looked fine in this. I mean, didn't have any really impactful plays, but again, I think you can see why they were excited about him in fall. Shamar Arnu is a guy that, yeah, he's going to be really good. Really liked what I saw from him and also from Max Redman, who came in for Earl Little at that rover spot. So it was Earl Little. Shaheem Brown played a little bit there, one play, and I think he actually got maybe dinged up a little bit there. Then Donnie Hebert played, and then Max Redman came in, and Max Redman was laying the lumber, and he looks like a very well-suited player to that center rover position. And, you know, this defense, as that rover position goes, so will this defense. It's really going to be important that they have players that can actually play that spot and be good. So as Redmond develops, that's hopeful. That's a thing you look at and you go, okay, well, looking toward the future, what are you going to be able to do? Well, maybe you got a guy right there. Other guys that stood out, I think Bates at corner has some nice feet. Didn't really see much of Lester out there. Didn't take note of anything that he did. So not really a guy I noticed much. The Desir twins obviously played well in their opportunities. I was a little bit underwhelmed by Tylon Lee, even though he did have a tackle for loss, but I think he's more raw than maybe what was anticipated coming in, at least more than I maybe anticipated coming in. The athleticism is pretty good, but he's got a long way to go. He's going to need a good offseason and so on to get there. But yeah, all in all, I thought this was a revealing win and a win that gives them some opportunities to continue to advance. Maybe from here on out, they should just fair catch all punts for the rest of the year. I'd be fine with that. Just put somebody back there who's going to fair catch everything and catch everything, and you're good to go. But we'll see about what they do there. I think on the whole, successful week for Florida State, and the fact that Bama also scored 70 against ULM. I mean, that might actually be more revealing about how good this team might be than what we just saw. So, and then of course, there's the turmoil down in Gainesville, which, dropping a game on your home field to USF. We've seen Florida State do that before, and that was not a good era for Florida State football and led to some changes. I don't see how Billy Napier survives past this season. They may wait until the end of the season to fire him for various contractual reasons, but I don't think there's any way that guy's the head coach in 2026. You look ahead at their schedule, and it is a monster schedule. I wasn't sure they were a bowl team coming into the year, and now after having lost to USF, I'm not sure how they make a bowl given their schedule. I mean, this is going to be really, really rough. And, by the end of the year, by the time they get to Florida State, they could be pretty banged up and maybe have fully quit on the season. Now, the danger is that maybe that's the one game they really invest in under maybe an interim coach or something by that point. But you're kind of hoping that by that time they get to you and they kind of quit on the season and you can just roll over them in the way that that happened to Florida State against Florida last year. But, we'll see. Like I said, I don't see Napier surviving the season. And Florida has won a couple recruiting battles against FSU this cycle with Napier and company actually pulling a couple guys. You do wonder whether or not a couple of those guys where it came down to Florida and Florida State, whether those guys wind up tipping to Florida State and really adding more juice to the 2026 class and beyond. That'd be very, very good. Right now, if I was handicapping the Florida job, I'd say the guy that beat him on the field this week might be the front runner to be the guy to take the job next, Alex Golesh. But caveat emptor, make sure that you actually want to go there. It's not been a place that's been real friendly to coaches in recent years. So good luck to whoever takes that position, but not really. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. That'll do for us now. Thanks for listening, as always. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. I am especially grateful for those of you at the Dynasty level. That is Brian Leininger, Dave Blair, Jack Horton, Jonathan Kennedy, Lee Caswell, Travis Smith, and Tyler Kashishki. You all are far more generous than I deserve. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.